What conspiracy theories turned out to be true? CIA putting LSD in the water supply. Except it was only a handful of extremely small, 800 pop, towns in the American Southwest, and the outcome was not, we have a mind control serum, but instead, that deeply troubled a lot of rural elderly people, who had no idea what was happening to them. Colombia's government and high-rank military officials killed farmers and poor people just to get personnel promoted and support from people. The bodies had uniforms just like the ones guerrilla soldiers used to wear. People started noticing that something was wrong with these guerrillero bodies when the boots in some of the bodies were backwards and a lot of people went missing from villages. Ernest Hemingway believed he was being followed by the FBI. It was passed off as paranoid delusions by the medical community and the world at large. But the Freedom of Information Act revealed that Hemingway was an amateur agent in Cuba during the war, but also seen as a potential communist sympathizer by the FBI, who did later follow him. It played a major role in his suicide, though obviously there were many other factors. Edited in inconsistent and redundant sentence. My father, who I previously thought was insane, was convinced the meds the military used to prevent malaria caused serious and permanent behavioral health issues. 30 years later I was prescribed a different malaria med as a preventative before a trip, and I jokingly mentioned my father's theory to the document. Mefloquine. Yeah, that's actually true. That's why we switched to this one. Edit. The conspiracy part is that the Department of Defense has known for a very long time, at least as far back as the 80s, that mefloquine causes some F***KED-UP psychiatric problems, in some cases permanently. They vehemently denied the issues were caused by mefloquine and instead blamed PTSD, stress, and pre-existing issues. They have since conceded, albeit not formally, that mefloquine causes serious issues and now use doxycycline and malarone. Now stop and grilling me about how this isn't a conspiracy theory. I lived in Oregon in the 70s and 80s. Everyone always talked about how the Evergreen Airport was used by the CIA, but they always denied it. The CIA has a special gun that shoots dissolvable darts that leave no trace and cause people to get a heart attack. It was dismissed as a conspiracy theory before the gun actually turned out to be true during a trial, where it was demonstrated by CIA operatives. Project Encultura. Basically the government was experimenting on people. It is super F***KED up. My grandfather was afraid of moving into a nursing home or living alone. He was convinced people working in elderly medical care were out to get him. A few years later a local nurse is in the news as a serial killer who believed she was doing the right thing, ending lives early. Around the same time a home visiting nurse, who was supposed to help him, got frustrated and hit him. So I removed her from the house, which was something he wouldn't have been able to do. After reporting that nurse everywhere, she was still doing home visits for an acquaintance, until I told him to. Drug money is used to rig elections and train brutal, corporate-sponsored dictators around the world. The business plot. The 1930s robber barons attempted a violent overthrow of FDR's government. https n. The CIA funding drug smuggling and dealing. The government was listening to us. My grandma and great aunt would speak in code to each other because they thought the government was listening into their phone conversations. We rolled our eyes at them until the Snowden NSA leak happened. The global elitist pedophile ring. The CIA kickstarted the crack epidemic that devastated many US black urban areas in the 80s in order to pay for death squads in Central America. There was an investigative series in the mid-90s written by a journalist named Gary Webb in the San Jose Mercury NEWS** where he chronicled the CIA's trafficking of cocaine on behalf of the anti-communist Contras in Nicaragua. This got picked up by several other larger newspapers and prompted several official government investigations. The paper got pushback, which eventually led to them retracting parts of the investigative series, and the official government reports whitewashed the entire thing and Gary Webb resigned in disgrace. He would later kill himself in 2004. TLDR. Journalist at medium-sized newspaper expose CIA drug trafficking helped lead to crack explosion. The government and journalists from bigger papers destroy him. He dies from 2 shots to the head, which is ruled a suicide. His reporting appears to be mostly true. Operation Condor. The USA financed with money and weapons military groups in all South America to prevent the communism or socialism to impose in any country on the continent. It turns out that they began to establish dictatorships that in some cases lasted for decades, disappearing tens of thousands of people against the regime. One of the most widely known cases, Pinochet in Chile and Videla in Argentina. Playing football causes brain damage. They knew since the 80s, but it was becoming such a juggernaut that they climate change engineered it. Not really a conspiracy, but the author of Hunt for Red October got the story of submarines so accurate that the Department of Defense investigated him, thinking he was a spy. My grandfather for years told everyone his well water was poisoned. Everyone thought it was one of his many delusions. Eventually one of my uncles tested the water from his well, and it turns out it was unsafe to drink. Even though it wasn't the Soviets who has poisoned it. The US government funding the drug trade in South America in order to get funds for fighting communism around the world. The journalist that discovered this back in the 80s was found dead shortly after being discredited. His death was ruled a suicide. Cultura. The CIA performing mind control experiments on American citizens. Dunno if it would count, or if it was known, but just not widely known. But planned obsolescence by mobile phone companies. People suspected their phones were being slowed down on purpose when a new phone arrived. Operation Northwoods. The Joint Chiefs of Staff drew up and approved plans to create terrorist acts on US soil to drum up support for a war and invasion of Cuba in the 1960s. President Kennedy rejected the plan, which included innocent Americans being shot dead on the streets, boats carrying refugees fleeing Cuba, to be sunk on the high seas, a wave of violent terrorism, to be launched in Washington, D.C., Miami, and elsewhere, people being framed for bombings they did not commit, and planes being hijacked. Late to the party, but here we go. At my high school, we had recently had one of our English teachers promoted to assistant principal to fulfill a void at the position. The teacher who took the job was an extremely attractive woman who many of the students would joke about wanting to have sex with her. When she was promoted to the position, many rumors circulated that the teacher had an affair with our head principal to get the promotion. About a year later, said teacher had a near-death experience, and all caught up in the hysteria of what was going on, she admitted to her husband that she actually did have an affair with our head principal. When word got out that the affair had happened, everyone in our school was chaos. Both principals never returned to their positions, and they had to hire new interim principals for the last 3 months of school. Make sure to like and subscribe for more daily content. Thanks for watching.